Enough, Susan, my mom shouted, her voice quivering with frustration as she leaned forward, her glare cutting through the tension like a blade. The ornaments on the Christmas tree sparkled faintly under the dim glow of the living room lights, but the festive warmth felt cruelly hollow. I sat frozen, my hands gripping my lap, trying to quell the anger rising inside me. You always have to make everything about you, my dad added, his tone sharp enough to sting. The words hit harder than I expected, and for a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the clock on the mantel. My name is Susan Blanchard. I was 32 years old then, and this was Christmas Eve in the late 1970s, a time when families like ours in rural Illinois depended on one another. Our family farm, passed down for generations, was struggling to stay afloat. Years earlier, I'd moved to Chicago to become a lawyer, a choice my parents still saw as a betrayal of our roots. Meanwhile, my older brother Jake stayed behind, running the farm and basking in the glow of our parents' constant praise. I didn't resent him for staying, it was how they treated me that stung. No matter what I did, I was always the outsider. Since summer, I'd quietly sent money to the farm's shared account, hoping to help with the mounting bills Jake had mentioned. He'd asked me to keep it between us, insisting it would hurt our parents' pride if they knew. At the time, it made sense. I trusted Jake to handle it, but now, sitting at the table, listening to our parents heap praise on him for sacrificing so much to save the farm, I felt a deep sense of betrayal. Jake's the reason we've been able to keep things going, my mom said, her voice thick with pride. I don't know what we'd do without him. I looked across the room at Jake, expecting some sign of acknowledgement or guilt. Instead, he leaned back in his chair with a smirk, clearly enjoying the spectacle. That was the breaking point. Actually, I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to pierce the chatter, I'm the one who's been sending money, every month since July. My dad scoffed, shaking his head as if I'd just said something absurd. Don't start making things up, Susan. Jake's been here day in and day out, working his tail off for this family. Why would you even say something like that? The dismissive tone stung more than the words. My mom crossed her arms, her expression cold. Honestly, Susan, it's Christmas. Can we not ruin the evening with your need for attention? Anger and humiliation surged through me. I'm not making it up, I said firmly. I've been depositing money at the Chicago branch of the bank, directly into the farm account. Every single deposit came from me. But they weren't listening. My dad waved me off with an exasperated sigh, and my mom turned to Jake, who shrugged, feigning ignorance. The frustration was unbearable. Are you really going to sit there and lie, Jake? I demanded, my voice sharp. You know I've been making those deposits. Jake didn't flinch. He leaned back, his smirk widening. I have no idea what you're talking about, Susan, he said, his tone dripping with false innocence. My blood boiled. Unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head, but our parents didn't seem to care. My dad sighed heavily, as if I were the one ruining the evening, while my mom cast Jake a sympathetic glance, as though he were the victim. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor, and locked eyes with Jake. You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my voice trembling with anger. Those deposits weren't small. You've been letting our parents believe you're some kind of hero, when all you've done is lie. If you don't admit it now, I'll leave first thing tomorrow, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions roiling inside. I'll go back to Chicago and get the proof myself. Jake shrugged, leaning back in his chair with infuriating nonchalance. You're wasting your time, Susan, he said with a chuckle. Whatever story you've cooked up in your head, go ahead and prove it. In that moment, I realized Jake didn't think I'd actually follow through. To him, this was just another family argument that would fizzle out, one where I'd eventually back down, letting him win like always. His smirk said it all. He thought I was too afraid of the fallout to take action. But that smirk only fueled my determination. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, not this time. He'd lied, taken advantage of me, and soaked up our parents' praise while treating my contributions like they didn't exist. I wasn't staying silent. The next morning, I packed my bags, unable to endure another moment in that house. When I told my parents I was leaving, my mom sighed, her voice heavy with disapproval. It's Christmas, Susan, she said, as if I were the one ruining everything. My dad didn't even look up from his coffee. Can't go a single holiday without causing a scene, he muttered. Jake, of course, barely hid his grin, lounging smugly in his chair as though he'd already won. I didn't respond. I wasn't staying, not with everyone acting like I was the problem. I knew the banks were closed, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of there. away from their judgment and his lies. The drive back to Chicago felt endless. The roads were eerily quiet, most people home celebrating with their families. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, the cold winter air seeping into the car, despite the heater working overtime. My thoughts churned, replaying the events of the night before. Jake didn't believe I'd actually do it. He probably thought I'd stew in silence, too intimidated by our parents' blind faith in him to act. But this time was different. I was done being dismissed, done letting him walk all over me. As I passed snow-covered fields and frozen lakes, one thing became certain: I would get the proof, and I would make sure everyone knew the truth. A few days later, when the banks reopened, I went straight to the Chicago branch. The morning was bitterly cold, the kind of cold that stung your skin and made every breath sharp. I stepped inside, the warmth of the bank a welcome relief, and approached the counter. "Good morning," the teller greeted me with a polite smile. "How can I help you today?" I explained, my tone firm but measured, that I needed copies of every deposit I had made to the Blanchard farm account since July. The teller nodded and disappeared into the back. He returned with a thick ledger and a small machine that began printing receipts. One by one, the records emerged, each with my name, the dates, and the amounts clearly listed. When he handed me the stack of receipts, his smile was polite but curious. "Here you go, ma'am. Let us know if there's anything else you need." "Thank you," I said, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the papers. They weren't just receipts, they were proof, undeniable evidence of Jake's lies. With the stack in hand, I headed back to my car. The roads were still slick from the recent snowstorm, but I didn't care. I needed to get back to the farm. The receipts sat on the passenger seat, neatly stacked and secured under a small paperweight I'd grabbed from my desk. Every time I glanced at them, my anger reignited. Jake really thought he could get away with this, and worse, that our parents had so readily taken his side. The drive back felt longer this time, the farm seeming farther away with every mile. As I passed through quiet towns and frozen landscapes, my mind raced, replaying every dismissive comment, every smug grin Jake had flashed during Christmas Eve. By the time I pulled into the long driveway leading to the farmhouse, adrenaline was coursing through me. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't leaving until they saw the truth with their own eyes. I walked into the house, the receipts clutched tightly in my hand, the cold from outside still biting at my coat. My mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove, while my dad sat at the dining table, the newspaper held in his usual grip. Jake leaned against the counter, casually eating an apple, looking as smug as ever. They all turned to face me as I entered, but I didn't wait for any of them to speak. Instead, I strode to the table and dropped the stack of receipts in front of my dad. "There," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Every deposit I've made to the farm account since July. My name, the dates, the amounts, it's all right there." My dad frowned, setting down his newspaper as he picked up the receipts. He started flipping through them, his brows furrowing deeper with each page. My mom wandered over, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jake stayed where he was, but I noticed his smirk falter, just for a second. This can't be right," my dad muttered, scanning the pages again. "Why would you do this, Susan?" My mom's lips thinned as she leaned in to see for herself. "Jake said he's been covering everything," she said, her tone laced with confusion and disbelief. I turned to Jake, locking eyes with him. "Well, Jake?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Are you still going to lie about it now?" Jake chuckled, tossing the apple core into the trash with a casual flick of his wrist. "Susan," he said smoothly, "I don't know where you got those, but they're not real. You probably forged them to make me look bad." His calm, mocking tone churned my stomach. I glanced at our parents, expecting, hoping, for a flicker of doubt, but all I saw was their disappointment aimed squarely at me. "Susan," my dad said, his voice low and angry, "what's gotten into you? This is a new low, even for you." My mom grabbed the stack of receipts, holding them like they were contaminated. "Did you think we wouldn't see through this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Jake's been here every day, working to keep this farm alive, and you," she jabbed the receipts toward me, "you come back with some phony papers and expect us to believe it? You've always been so desperate for attention." The tightness in my chest threatened to break me, but I fought to keep the tears at bay. "They're not fake," I said, my voice trembling with controlled anger. "You can call the bank yourself if you don't believe me." But they didn't even consider it. Instead, they stood united in their unwavering defense of Jake. My dad tossed the receipts back onto the table like they were trash. "Enough, Susan," he said, his tone final. I stared at them, stunned by their refusal to even entertain the truth. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice rising as the weight of their disbelief crushed me. "Even with the proof right here in black and white, you still defend him? I've spent months helping keep this farm afloat, and all you've done is give Jake the credit and call me a liar." Jake crossed his arms, leaning against the counter with that infuriating smirk. "Don't be so dramatic, Susan," he said with a shrug. "You've always been jealous. This isn't any different." That was the last straw. "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice breaking with anger. "Don't expect me to ever come back here. I've had enough." My mom's face tightened, and my dad shook his head in disappointment, as if I were the one in the wrong. Without another word, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it was better than staying in that house another second. By the time I got back to Chicago, I'd made up my mind. No more bending over backward for people who refused to see the truth. The first thing I did after unpacking was call the bank. "No further transfers to that account," I told the teller, my voice steady, despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. It felt strange, like cutting a cord that had tied me to the farm for so long. But it also felt freeing, like I was finally letting go of a burden I never should have carried. At first, I thought I'd feel guilty. I didn't. Every time I thought about Jake's smug face or our parents' blind defense of him, my resolve only strengthened. Let Jake handle the farm. Let him be the hero he pretended to be. I wasn't going to keep throwing money into a place that treated me like an outsider. 6 months passed in silence. Not a phone call, not a letter, nothing. I focused on my work and tried to push the anger and hurt aside. Then, one summer afternoon, there was a knock on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. Standing there were my mom and dad, looking tired and hesitant. My dad cleared his throat. "Can we come in?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. My mom clutched her purse tightly, her lips pressed into a thin line. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces. But curiosity won out. I stepped aside and let them in. They sat awkwardly on my couch, glancing around like they didn't know where to start. "What do you want?" I asked finally, leaning against the armrest of a chair with my arms crossed. Whatever they had to say, I wanted it out in the open. My dad stared at the floor, his voice low and hesitant. "Susan, we owe you an apology. A big one." My mom nodded, her grip on her purse so tight her knuckles were white. "We were wrong," she said softly. "We didn't believe you when you tried to tell us the truth. And, we need to make this right." I crossed my arms and leaned back in the chair. "Go on," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. My dad let out a heavy sigh. "After you left, things started falling apart on the farm, bills piled up, equipment broke down, and the crops didn't bring in enough to keep us going. At first, we thought Jake had it handled. He kept saying he'd figure it out, but he didn't, and when we pressed him, he trailed off." Glancing at my mom. Her eyes were brimming with tears as she picked up where he left off. "He confessed, Susan. He admitted it. You were the one making the deposits all those months. You were the reason we stayed afloat." She hesitated, her voice trembling. "We couldn't believe it, not just that he lied, but that we didn't listen to you when you tried to tell us. We're sorry, Susan, truly sorry, for not believing you, for how we treated you, for everything. You didn't deserve any of it." I stared at them. For the first time, I saw something in their faces I hadn't expected, genuine shame. My dad met my gaze, his expression heavy with regret. "We're asking for your forgiveness, Susan," he said quietly. "I know we don't deserve it, but we had to come here and tell you the truth. You saved the farm, and we owe you more than an apology." For a moment, I let their words hang in the air. Part of me wanted to let the silence stretch on forever, to make them sit with their guilt, but instead, I asked, "Where's Jake?" My voice was calm, but anger simmered just beneath the surface. My mom exchanged a nervous glance with my dad before answering. He's still at the farm. He wanted to come with us, but we thought it was better if we spoke to you alone first. My dad nodded, shifting uncomfortably. He's been keeping to himself since he admitted everything. I think he knows there's no excuse for what he did. He's ashamed. Ashamed? I repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. That's rich. After months of letting you believe I was a liar? After taking credit for everything I did to keep the farm running? My dad looked down, his face pale. You're right, he said softly. We let it go on far too long. That's on us as much as it is on him. But he wanted us to tell you that he's sorry. He knows he doesn't deserve forgiveness. Oh, he wanted you to tell me? I snapped, leaning forward. Are you serious? You're still protecting him. Even now, he should be here, apologizing to my face. You should have forced him to come. My voice echoed through the small apartment, and I saw the shock on their faces, but I didn't care. I was done tiptoeing around their favoritism. My mom opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Do you even hear yourselves? He lies, manipulates, and twists everything I did into some heroic story for himself. And now, when it's time to take responsibility, you're still shielding him? What? He's too embarrassed to face me, so you're here cleaning up his mess? Do you realize how insane that sounds? My dad shifted uncomfortably, gripping his knees. We thought this would be easier for everyone, he muttered. Easier for who? I shot back. For Jake? For you? Because it sure as hell isn't easier for me. Neither of them had a response. My mom looked down at her hands, nervously twisting the strap of her purse, while my dad stared at the floor, his jaw tight. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating, until finally, my dad stood. You're right, he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. We should have brought him. We should have made him face you. I don't know why we didn't. Maybe because we've been making excuses for him for so long. It's just what we do. My mom followed his lead, clutching her purse to her chest. She looked at me with watery eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. We're sorry, Susan. You deserved better from all of us. Without waiting for a response, they walked toward the door. My dad opened it, pausing for a moment to glance back at me, his face filled with regret. Then they were gone, the door clicking shut behind them. For a long time, I just sat there, the weight of their shame hanging in the room like a ghost. For the first time in my life, it felt like they finally saw the truth. A week later, there was another knock at my door. When I opened it, my stomach turned. Jake was standing there, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, looking as miserable as I'd ever seen him. Susan, he said, his voice low and hesitant, can I come in? For a moment, I considered slamming the door in his face, but instead, I stepped aside, letting him in without a word. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He didn't sit or take off his jacket. Finally, he spoke. I came to apologize, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, for everything, for lying, for taking credit for the money you sent, for letting Mom and Dad treat you the way they did. His voice cracked, but I stayed silent, waiting. I don't have an excuse, he continued. I was jealous of you, Susan. I've always been jealous. You've done so much with your life, and I stayed behind. I thought if I could keep their approval, I'd feel, I don't know, important, but it was wrong, all of it. Jake's voice broke completely, and before I could say anything, he dropped his head into his hands and started to cry, big, heavy sobs that shook his entire body. It wasn't the kind of crying you fake. It was raw, filled with shame. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure of what to say or do. After that day, something shifted. My parents didn't call right away, but when they did, their tone was different. No defensiveness, no excuses. My dad mentioned they'd started handling the farm finances themselves. My mom let it slip that Jake was working to make things right. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. As for Jake, he stayed out of my way after that apology. He didn't try to fix things too quickly, which was fine by me. Trust isn't something you rebuild overnight. But knowing my family finally saw the truth, and the hurt they'd caused, was enough to give me a little peace.